So this one is non-attachment, duality, reading, ethics, and morals. Ooh, number 4. Non-duality. That's basically just being separated from the ism, the thing. Detachment, if you'd like. We could talk about reading a little bit too, I guess. I got into reading 2021, 2022. I got into reading because I was looking to discipline myself. And reading is a good discipline exercise because you have to keep reading to finish the book. But then what I also found out after reading was that if some people are authors, then why would they read if they could rather take that time reading by writing? So then it became this whole thing about, oh, I'm going to buy this book, and I bought the book. But then when I changed and I evolved as a person, it's not that the book all of a sudden didn't matter. It's that there were actually more books that I became interested in reading, and then the whole cycle kept happening. So then at home, I have this giant collection of books. And it's like, you know what? At some point, they're going to have to be read. But then at another point, it's like the the viewer might listen to this and say, oh, August is procrastinating. No, 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 no. Actually, sure. I'll fancy what you're saying. But I'll say this. If by definition, there's no such thing as procrastination, and just play with me for a second with this, then what I'm implying there is that divine timing and right timing, and by you acting is the right time, then you don't feel shame, guilt, regret, or despair. Because sitting there and saying, oh, I'm procrastinating, is giving yourself the onus to say, you know what, I told myself I was going to do something and I let myself down. And although that is holding yourself responsible, at the same time, it's also in a fascinating way saying, like, hey, the timing is actually right now. And it could have been right then. But if I'm a bit older and a bit wiser, and I have a bit more wisdom and knowledge to then go use that for me to learn or read, then what I'm going to learn and read is going to ultimately change, because here's the fascinating thing is that I also have who I am and what I am. And if by definition that's an evolved person and an evolved perspective, then I can see how that person who bought the book, the younger version of myself, would have been influenced by that reading, but then also realizing that hypothetically, if I learned what's in the book without reading the book, then the older version of me would sit there and be like, oh, I understand it now. But see, also in the same way, is just in the same way how I read the Bible growing up, and I didn't necessarily know what was going on in the Bible. But then after realizing that it's all semantics, it's a completely different reading experience. And so when I read the same scriptures back, being a bit older and wiser with new tools in my tool belt, I have a completely different understanding of what the parables and the verses mean and offer. So why any of this matters and why it involves ethics and morals is that the person who bought most of those books in that bookshelf was developing ethics and morals that somehow, in an objective way, differ than the person that bought the books. And so, because of that, I now have a different baseline with different ethics and different morals. I essentially have the opportunity to go and be like, hey, you know what? There's a completely different reason to be reading these books. Because here's another thing, is that I'm essentially speaking to a black mirror right now, right? And if I could do this enough times so that it's a routine of sorts, and let's just say hypothetically I get enough episodes posted to the point where people are like, oh, this guy has something to say, which really isn't the point, but I'm guessing some people are going to find the point to be that. Then hypothetically, I could be reading the book, come to this black mirror, turn the camera on, put the microphone in, and say, hey, I read this book, I learned this. If you, and see, like that kind of ties into what I was saying in the third episode, was that there's this thing that it has to do with ethics, because ultimately it refines morals. Maybe it's a moral thing that's refined my ethics. Maybe you can figure that out for me. Basically, what any of this means is that some people love trial and error. Some people feel it's necessary to essentially go mess up to learn how to do anything different. But see, it's not guaranteeing that you're going to learn how to do it differently. But see, by changing your ethics and morals, you could essentially have a standard, and then based off of what you deem as a standard, have the opportunity to go and only involve yourself with morals that are more suitable. So what any of this means is that a fourth grader has ethics and morals of a fourth grader. But if a 39-year-old never once learned about ethics and morals, and they never once grew up as a person, fully matured, what I mean by that is go through a self-discovery journey, or quite literally pick up books about ethics and morals, or quite literally be attached to their lives, or be attached to the fact that they think that they're their thoughts, then how are they any different than a fourth grader? Because see, that's what I've learned, is that, at least for myself, if the opportunity that I have as a person to grow up and evolve, let me put this to you very simply, just as simple as possible. Um, I'm surrounded by technology, and in a very literal sense, it's the highest quality technology you can have. Now, the only reason I got to that point was because I also realized that I could take the advice of someone who is so wise with technology that I could just say, you know what? If that guy has so much experience, and if I take that guy's advice, then I'm going to completely jump over every possible sense of like trial and error, and I'm going to supersede myself to a, a morality that involves ethics of that standard, that preference. Let me put it again a little bit more simply for you. If by definition, hmm, okay, the best way to explain this is with the clothes I'm wearing. I'm only wearing cotton. I used to have this thing called restless leg syndrome, where the restless leg, like I'd have to just keep moving my leg. I used to also have a skin condition where I realized, like, wait, what happens when I do something, aka change the clothes I'm wearing? Would that affect whether I keep moving my leg, and would that affect the skin condition? And ultimately, the answer was no. But where I'm going with this is clothes are gatekept by brands. So, for example, the only reason I thought that wearing cotton clothes would do anything for me was because, and to reassure you, it's more of a maintenance thing. So, like, me wearing the cotton is more about allowing myself to not only be detached from labels, because there isn't a label on my body, but then also in the essence of duality. I realized, you know what, the expensive designer stores, like those guys, they don't give people plastic, and all I was wearing was plastic, like all the athletic stuff, right? I realized, like, wait, if I stop wearing the plastic, then that's gonna change the electromagnetics of my body. Because then what I also realized was that when you go to a fancy restaurant, they have the glass bottled water that they pour water from. And ultimately, what any of that meant was like, wait, I'm looking at an elevated version of ethics because their morals are different. So then, me changing my clothes was actually like, wait, I gotta change the water I drink and whether I could use a microwave or not, the kind of cutting boards I used. And then that was a microcosm that led to me, this macrocosm. And so, what any of this means and where any of this is going is that by adapting my ethics and morals, I realized that I don't have to be a trial and error kind of person if by sticking true to my ethics and morals, I get a particular experience of life that doesn't involve, it basically supersedes time, is the point I'm getting at. The point I'm getting at here is that when you upgrade your ethics and morals, you could supersede time. And it's not that you're trying to beat time or that time is an illusion. I'm not going down that path. What I'm saying is that if you can change the quality of your decisions, your actions, then your purpose in life changes and everything around you is significantly different. And the reason I'm saying that is that, like, you don't have to have the root base 0 1 as like the rest of society. We've involved ourselves with stuff like college and all these other jobs and whatnot. And it's like, no, no, no. Not everyone has the same upbringing. Not everyone has the same reason to be alive. Not everyone has the same reason to go to work. Not everyone has the same reason to create things. So your root base 0 will change when your ethics and morals change. And ultimately, that's the point I'm getting across here, is that the moment you establish your own ethics and your own morals, you have the opportunity to supersede time and essentially realize and experience and feel a version of happiness and joy and success. Oh wow, this is pretty awesome. So like the typical 9 to 5 is like a kind of a thing where um you start as the, you know, interviewee, you get hired, and then you got to work yourself up the corporate structure. But what I realized is like you could completely supersede all that by just not having a corporate job, because ultimately the whole precipice there is that college was able to do two things. It was able to define your ethics, and it was able to define your morals, because you didn't go find them yourself. You relied on the system to tell you those things. Because they told you those things, they then could control what you could find scary or, yeah. And because they could influence what you found to be scary, they also influenced your experience in life and how you're living. And when I realized that, I was like, wait, like that's awesome. Like I could do that in a great way with people that I work with. Because that's a whole nother thing is that there's just some people who quite literally may not completely get what they're doing here. And what am I doing here? I'm all I know is that I'm talking to a black mirror. Other than that, the only thing I know is that I don't know. Let me just give myself that version of humility right now. But what I realized is like if I take responsibility for myself and I detach myself from what can be considered success, but I respect that there is sacrifice, that I'd rather not have certain things, but I prefer as a standard other things. But again, by detaching myself from it entirely, what I come across what I come across is quite literally receiving only the things that make me happy. I'm not attached to any of it because I'm only feeling the feeling. So, like for example, I know as from just me saying in the camera that where I am in this location and what I'm doing and how I'm doing in all this, it's gonna change. Like change. This is the season of change. So part of this is like I get to document this with the aspect that I have all the opportunity with these ethics and morals to display to you what happens when you have ethics and morals. This is gonna be great. This already feels awesome. Oh. So episode 5 is gonna be what is art, what is creativity. 6 is gonna be more about art, and then 7 is more about what I learned. But I could feel that right now is a time I have to go spin the Taurus. So I'm gonna go get in my car, and because this is my way of life, listen to music, go get my berries, and then recharge. Probably soak up some sun. Because this is fun. I love doing this. I actually do love doing this. Because I get to speak and because I understand myself. I don't have to worry about other people and whether they can interpret what I'm saying or whether they are. Because everyone can listen, but who's hearing what I'm saying? And I can go point and describe whatever I want, but that doesn't mean they know what I'm talking about. Ethics and morals. Take care. All the best. Seriously.